Marcus Booker, 37, a black American mechanic from the east side of Charlotte, North Carolina, stood outside an Italian restaurant in Uptown, wearing a freshly pressed blue shirt that still showed faint motor oil at the knuckles. He had driven past the entrance 3 times before he pulled in. He had never seen her face. He only knew her name, Eleanor. She came toward him slightly, out of breath, one strand of hair loose from its place. Before Marcus could speak, she leaned into the space between them and whispered exactly 5 words that froze him where he stood. The morning that led to those 5 words started the way every morning in the Booker household started. The smell of coffee that Marcus had brewed too strong because he never measured anything carefully before 7. The sound of his 9-year-old daughter, Imani, singing in the bathroom, a song she had invented herself about a cat who wanted to be an astronaut. The radiator clicking in the hallway because the small rental house off Central Avenue had a heating system that announced itself like an uninvited relative every fall. Marcus stood in the kitchen of the East Side bungalow he had rented for the past 6 years, holding a wide-tooth comb in one hand and a small bottle of leave-in conditioner in the other, waiting for his daughter to come and sit between his knees on the rug so he could part and twist her hair before school. His hands were not delicate hands. They were the hands of a man who had spent 18 years under the hoods of trucks and sedans at a shop on North Tryon Street. The knuckles were thickened. The cuticles were stained in places that no amount of soap would lift. But when Imani came and sat down and tilted her head back so he could reach the crown, those same hands moved with a patience that surprised people who had only seen him working a transmission. He had taught himself to braid by watching tutorials on a cracked phone late at night for almost a year after his wife passed away. Naomi had been the one who knew how to do hair. After she was gone, there had been no one else. So Marcus had learned. His co-worker at the shop, a wide-shouldered man named Darius, had been trying to set him up on a blind date for the better part of 4 months. Darius was not aggressive about it. He was the kind of man who wore people down the way water wore down stone, with patience and small repetitions. A comment here, a name drop there. There is somebody I think you would actually like, man. No pressure. Just one dinner. Marcus had said no 12 times in 12 different ways, and Darius had accepted every refusal with the calm of a person who already knew he would eventually win. Darius won on a Tuesday afternoon in the break room when Marcus was eating a turkey sandwich and was not paying close enough attention to mount a 13th defense. By the time he registered what he had agreed to, Darius was already typing the restaurant address into his phone. Her name is Eleanor, Darius said. She is good people. That is all you need to know going in. Imani found out the way Imani always found out things. By being 9 years old and paying close attention to everything, while appearing to pay attention to nothing. Marcus had mentioned the dinner to Darius on the phone that evening, while Imani was supposedly absorbed in coloring at the kitchen table. By the time he ended the call, his daughter was watching him from across the room, with an expression he had learned to recognize. The barely contained delight of a child who had just been handed a piece of grown-up information she had no intention of giving back. She did not ask a single question. She just smiled, the kind of smile that meant she had filed everything away for later. And she said, with the certainty of a small judge delivering a verdict, "You have a date." "It is not a date," Marcus said, which was technically a lie. Imani's smile told him she knew that too. She did not bring it up again until the afternoon before the dinner, when she appeared in the doorway of his bedroom while he was standing in front of his open closet with the look of a man trying to diffuse something he did not fully understand. His usual clothes, the ones he wore to the shop every day, suddenly seemed inadequate. He owned 3 collared shirts. He was unsure which of them said, "I am a trustworthy person, and I am not going to be strange about this." Imani pushed past him into the closet, studied his shirts for approximately 4 seconds, and pointed. "The blue one," she said. "Why the blue one?" Marcus asked. "Because warm colors keep people feeling warm," she said. "People trust warm colors." She delivered this with the complete certainty she brought to most pronouncements, as though the answer had been obvious all along, and she was simply helping her father catch up. Marcus put on the blue shirt. Imani followed him into the small bathroom, stood on her tiptoes, smoothed his collar down with both small hands, and pressed out an invisible wrinkle with a focus that was almost painful to watch. Then she stepped back, tilted her head, and pronounced him acceptable. It was while he was reaching for his good jacket, the one that did not smell like the garage, that Imani slipped behind him and pushed something small and folded into his left breast pocket. He felt it land. By the time he turned around, she was already backing toward the hallway, both hands behind her back, grinning. "What did you just put in my pocket?" he asked. "Nothing," she said. "Imani, it is a good thing," she said. "Do not take it out unless you need it. And do not show her right away. Only if it feels right." Marcus reached for the pocket. Imani held up one hand like a crossing guard. "Dad." He left the paper where it was. She walked him to the door the way she did every evening, shoes lined up neatly by the mat, both arms wrapped briefly around his waist, chin tipped up to look at him. Something different in her face tonight, something older than 9. "Do not be scared," she said. "Just be kind. That is all you have to do." It was at the door that Mrs. Loretta Hayes, the retired school teacher from 3 houses down, who had been watching Imani 2 or 3 evenings a week for the better part of 5 years, said the sentence that made Marcus pause with his hand on the screen handle. "Oh, by the way," Loretta said, in the casual tone she used for things she did not realize were significant, "your girl was on the phone for about 15 minutes last night, laughing the whole time. Sweetest sound I have heard all week." Marcus turned around slowly. Imani was crouched by the coffee table, lining up her crayons by color. She did not look up. "Who was she on the phone with?" Marcus asked. "I assumed somebody from her class," Loretta said. "She used my phone." Marcus looked at his daughter, Imani, 9 years old, who did not own a phone of her own. Imani, who had no reason to be making any phone call that ran 15 minutes long. Imani, who at that exact moment was concentrating very deliberately on her crayons. He waited a beat to see if she would look up. She did not. He decided he would ask her about it tomorrow. He had a dinner to get to. The Ford F-150 was a 2014 model, with 142,000 miles on it, and a dent in the rear quarter panel from a parking lot incident he had never gotten around to fixing. Marcus climbed in, started the engine, and then sat in his own driveway with his hands on the wheel for the next 8 minutes. The radio was off. The heater hummed quietly. The dashboard clock moved 1 digit, then another, while he did not move at all. He had not opened a door for a woman in 8 years. Not since Naomi. His wife had died from complications following Imani's birth, when their daughter was 11 months old, a hemorrhage that the hospital had caught too late and treated too slowly. The lawsuit had settled quietly. The money had paid off the house Naomi had picked out, which Marcus had then sold because he could not stand the way the kitchen light fell in the afternoons. He had rented the bungalow on the east side instead. He had raised his daughter. He had not gone on a single date in any of the years that followed. He thought about the looks he usually got when people learned his situation. The tilted head, the softened eyes, the voice that dropped half a register. Oh, that must be so hard. The pity that came pre-packaged, and that he had learned to receive politely, without letting any of it touch the center of him. He did not need anyone's pity. He had a daughter who drew dragons on the backs of grocery receipts and fell asleep every night with a fistful of crayons still clutched in her hand. He had a full life. He also thought about a different kind of look, the kind he had been getting since he was a teenager. The look people gave a black man driving into a parking lot full of luxury cars in a part of town where black men were expected to be wearing a valet jacket rather than handing the valet a key. He thought about the bouncers who tracked him into bars, the hostess who would do the quick math behind her smile, the diners who would turn their heads half a second too long when he walked past their tables. He had learned, by the age of 19, how to make himself read as non-threatening at a glance. Soften the shoulders, slow the walk, smile first. He had built a whole second posture for entering rooms he had not been built into. Tonight, he was about to enter another one. At 7 minutes past 6, he put the truck in reverse and backed out of the driveway. He drove uptown by the long route that avoided the freeway, because the freeway made him think too fast. When he reached the block where the restaurant sat, he did not pull into the valet line. He drove 2 blocks past, parked his muddy work truck on a side street between a dental office and a closed dry cleaner, and walked the rest of the way. He did not want Eleanor, whoever she was, to look out the restaurant window and see his truck parked next to a row of Lexuses. At 6:58, he was standing at the door, checking his watch, when he heard footsteps approaching at a pace that was slightly faster than a stroll. He looked up. A woman was moving the way people moved when they had been running a little late and were trying not to look like it. Quick steps, chin up. One strand of dark hair caught in the cold air. Her coat was buttoned unevenly by one button. She had clearly not noticed. She was scanning the entrance as she walked, and when her eyes found him, something in her posture shifted. Not relaxed exactly, settled. The way a person settles when she realizes she has found the right place she was looking for. She was white, mid-30s, pale skin gone slightly pink from the cold, a small silver pendant at her throat. Marcus, in the half-second it took her to close the last few feet, registered the fact of her, and the fact of himself standing there, and the fact of the doorway between them. He had a heartbeat to decide what kind of evening he was going to have. He reached out, calmly, and pulled the door open for her. She stepped into the warmth of the entryway. He was about to say something. His name, probably, or hello, or some other collection of sounds that would have been perfectly adequate for the moment, when she turned toward him, leaned slightly closer, and spoke in a voice just low enough that only he could hear. "Your daughter helped with this." 5 words. Marcus's hand was still on the door. He became aware of that because he could no longer feel it. He could not, in that moment, feel very much of anything except a ringing in his chest that was not quite pain and not quite joy, and was something he had not felt in so long he had forgotten it had a name. In his head, the pieces snapped together with a quiet click. Loretta's voice at the door earlier that evening. The girl was on the phone for about 15 minutes last night, laughing the whole time. Imani crouched by the coffee table, not looking up, the folded paper in his breast pocket that he could feel against his ribs even now. His 9-year-old daughter had not just been told about this dinner. She had reached out to the woman his coworker was setting him up with. She had called this stranger from Loretta's kitchen phone. She had spoken to Eleanor. She had laughed for 15 minutes. She had planned something her father was only now beginning to understand the shape of. Eleanor was watching him with an expression that was carefully neutral. No smugness, no performance, just a kind of quiet attention, as though she understood that this was a lot to land on a man at a door, and she was willing to wait for him to catch up. The door swung shut behind them. The warmth of the restaurant pressed against the cold that had followed them in. Marcus stood in the small entryway and looked at this woman he had never met, with her uneven buttons, and her loose strand of hair, and her completely steady eyes, and felt the floor shift an inch beneath his feet. He had 2 choices. He could pretend he had not heard her. He could let the moment pass and steer them both onto safer ground. He had been a reliable architect of safer ground for 8 years now. Or he could ask. "How?" he said. "How do you know about my daughter?" The hostess took their coats. They were led to a corner table that the restaurant kept for people who needed a little more space than usual. Eleanor answered him once they were seated. She said that 2 evenings ago a number she did not recognize had called her cell. When she answered, a child's voice had asked, in a polite and rehearsed-sounding way, whether she was the Eleanor who was going to have dinner with Mr. Marcus on Thursday. The child had introduced herself as Imani and said she was 9 years old, and she was the daughter, and she wanted to ask Eleanor exactly 3 questions, if that was okay. What were the 3 questions? Marcus asked. Eleanor's mouth lifted slightly. The first one was, "Are you a kind person?" she said. The second one was, "Do you like to laugh?" The third one was, "Will you let my dad open the door for you? Because he likes to do that, and he has not done it in a long time." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, Eleanor was watching her water glass. "I should probably not have led with that at the door," she said. "It was," he agreed. She laughed, a short, embarrassed laugh. Something in his chest loosened a fraction. He reached into his breast pocket. The paper was still there, folded into a careful small square. He unfolded it on the table, smoothing it flat with one hand. It was a crayon drawing, 2 stick figures sitting side by side, their oversized hands joined in the middle. Smiles, but the shy kind. Beneath the drawing, in Imani's slightly uneven lettering, were 2 lines of text. Be kind to her. Maybe she is lonely too. Marcus pressed 2 fingers against the edge of the paper and breathed through the thing that had tightened in his throat. She is 9, he said. How long has it been just the 2 of you? Eleanor asked, gently. 8 years, he said. Her mother passed away when Imani was 11 months old. Eleanor did not offer the tilted head. She did not do the soft voice. She just nodded once, the way a person nods when she is filing information away rather than performing sympathy. They ordered. He learned that she worked in landscape architecture, that she had moved to Charlotte 4 years ago from a town outside Asheville. She learned that he had been a mechanic since he was 19, and that he had recently learned, through necessity and many late-night tutorials, how to do a French braid. They were somewhere between the main course and the question of dessert when Eleanor's hand moved to her bag. She took out a wallet, worn leather, soft at the corners. From inside it, she removed a piece of paper, old by the look of it, the kind of old that meant it had been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had gone white, and the paper itself had taken on a color that was not quite yellow, but was not white anymore either. She set it on the table between them. Marcus leaned forward. The drawing was in pencil, not crayon, but the same essential language. 2 stick figures, one sitting down, shoulders slightly curved, one standing beside it, with one arm extended, touching the seated figure's shoulder. Below them, in small, careful letters that must have been written by a young hand, were 6 words. It is okay. I am right here with you, sis. My little sister drew that for me, Eleanor said. I was in 7th grade. I had told her I felt invisible at school, that I went every day and it was like nobody could actually see me. She was 8. She could not fix any of it, so she drew me a picture instead. I have kept it ever since. It has been in my wallet for I do not even know how many years. I stopped counting when I saw the corner of paper sticking out of your pocket at the door. I just knew it was the same kind of thing. Children try to fix things in the only currency they have. The same reason every time. Marcus held the folded square in his palm and looked at the worn pencil drawing on the table and felt, for the first time in a long time, the particular vertigo of being seen. It was Marcus who noticed the couple first. 2 tables over to his left, a man in his early 60s with a tailored gray jacket and a heavy steel watch, and his wife, lacquered hair, a string of pearls. They had glanced over once when Marcus and Eleanor were brought to their seats. He had registered it and let it go. They had glanced over again when the waiter took their order. He had let that go too. The 3rd glance was longer. The 4th came with the man leaning sideways toward his wife and saying something behind his hand that produced a small, tight smile on her face. Marcus had been around long enough to know what was coming. He felt the heat begin to rise at the back of his neck, the familiar heat he had learned to swallow at 16, when a clerk at a hardware store had followed him through every aisle, pretending to restock shelves that did not need restocking. He kept his face still. The man at the next table set his glass down, turned his head just enough to make sure the angle was right, and said, in a voice pitched precisely loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "This is a nice neighborhood. I would have thought there were more appropriate places for that kind of date." The room did not go silent. It did something quieter than that. It thinned. The conversations nearest the man's table dropped half a notch in volume. A fork stopped. A waiter halfway across the room turned his head without turning his body. Eleanor set down her own fork very slowly. Marcus felt the familiar machinery start up inside him. Pay the check. Stand up. Apologize quietly. Walk out without making a scene. He was reaching for his wallet. Eleanor did not stand up. Eleanor did not raise her voice. Eleanor turned in her chair toward the man at the next table with a calm that was so complete it made the people watching forget, for a second, that there had ever been a different temperature in the room. She looked at him for a long moment, as though giving him a chance to reconsider in private. The man held her gaze. He had committed. This man, Eleanor said, with one small motion of her hand toward Marcus, just held the door open for me. which is more than my own father managed in 28 years. When you learn how to do that, you can have an opinion about where I sit. She turned back to her plate. She picked up her fork. She did not look at the man again. The wife at the next table had gone the color of her pearls. Before the man could find whatever sentence he was reaching for, the manager of the restaurant was at his elbow, having come across the floor without any of them quite noticing. A small, neatly dressed woman in her 50s. "I would like to ask you to settle your check, sir," the manager said, in the same calm voice Eleanor had used. "We do not seat that particular kind of guest at this restaurant. Your meal is on the house. Your coats are at the front." The man's mouth worked for another moment. His wife was already standing. They left in the kind of silence that follows the door closing on a conversation everyone in the room had pretended not to hear. The manager paused briefly at Marcus and Eleanor's table, laid one hand lightly on the edge of the table and said quietly, "Dinner tonight is also on the house. I am very sorry." Marcus let his breath out slowly. Across the table, Eleanor picked up her water glass with a hand that was steadier than his own. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have spoken for you." He shook his head. "No," he said. "That was yours too." After a few minutes, Eleanor said, "Can I tell you something I almost did not do tonight?" Marcus said, "Yes." She turned her water glass once on the table. "Darius is the cousin of a friend of mine," she said. "When he called me about you, he told me your name and what you did for a living. And then, because he is a careful person, and he likes me," he said, "he is a black man. Are you going to be okay with that?" He was not asking it the wrong way. He was asking it the right way. He has been the friend in the room when the other version of this conversation goes badly. He wanted me to think about it before I said yes, not after. Marcus did not interrupt. "I told him I was fine," Eleanor said, which was true. I have been fine my whole life on questions like that. But I sat in my parking garage for 15 minutes tonight before I came in, not because I was not fine, because I was asking myself a different question, whether I had the courage to walk into rooms with a person the world was always going to look at differently, whether I was going to be the kind of company in those rooms that did not make it worse, whether I was honest enough about what I did not know, whether what just happened with the man at the next table was going to happen often, and whether I was the kind of person who could keep her voice steady when it did, or whether I was the kind of person who would slowly start finding reasons not to call back. I have watched friends do that. I have watched them mean well at first and disappear anyway, the way fog burns off without anyone noticing. I did not want to be that." She paused. "I opened my wallet to put my parking ticket inside," she said. "I saw my sister's drawing. I thought of the way she had drawn that picture for me without knowing how to fix anything. I thought, coming in tonight, felt hard. Maybe that still counted. So I got out of the car and walked across the street and turned the corner and saw you standing at the door." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "I sat in my driveway for 8 minutes before I left the house tonight. I was thinking about a lot of the same things you were thinking about, from the other side. Whether I was going to spend the whole night being the version of me that is easy for the room to hold, the version that softens his shoulders at the door, slows his walk, smiles first, the version I have been performing since I was 19 years old. Whether you would notice if I did, whether you would still be here if I did not, whether 8 years of being a careful man with a child to protect had left me anything that still knew how to want this." "I would have noticed," Eleanor said. "I figured you would," he said. "That is partly why I almost did not come." They sat with it. They finished the rest of the meal slowly. He did not ask for the check, because the manager had already taken care of it. But he left a tip on the table that was almost the size of what the bill would have been, because the manager had also already taken care of him, and that was the only way he knew how to thank her, without making her have to accept thanks. Eleanor noticed and said nothing. They walked out together at 9:43. The street had quieted since he had arrived. Fewer people, colder air. The city settling into its later mode. Their breath showed faintly in front of them, small clouds that appeared and disappeared before they could become anything. They stood on the sidewalk, in the way people stand when something is ending, and neither person is entirely sure how to mark it. Eleanor reached into her bag. She took out her wallet, and from it the folded paper, the old one, the one with pencil lines and her little sister's careful handwriting, and she held it out to him. "I want you to have this," she said. Marcus looked at it in her hand. "That is yours," he said. "I know." She kept her hand extended. "I have had it for a long time. I think I kept it because I needed to remember that somebody saw me when I felt invisible. But I do not feel invisible the way I used to." Something moved briefly through her expression. "I think you and your daughter might understand it better than I do right now." He took it. The paper was lighter than it looked, which somehow made it heavier to hold. He stood on the sidewalk with a stranger's most important thing in his palm and felt the full, strange weight of having been trusted with it. There was something he wanted to say. He was aware of it the way a person is aware of a word that will not come. Present, real, just out of reach. What he said instead was, "Thank you. Tonight was really nice." Eleanor smiled, and it was genuine, and that somehow made it worse. "It was," she said. Then she turned and began walking down the sidewalk toward the parking garage, and Marcus turned in the opposite direction, toward where he had left his truck 2 blocks away. He counted his steps without meaning to. 1, 2, 5, 8, 10. He stopped. He stood on the sidewalk with the folded paper in his hand and the sound of her footsteps growing quieter behind him, and he understood with sudden, complete clarity what was happening. He had done this before, not with Eleanor. He had never met Eleanor before tonight, with the version of this moment that had come up in different forms over 8 years. The moment where something possible appeared, and he found a careful reason to let it pass. And then he went home to his routine and his daughter, and the life he had built that was good and real and safe and quiet. He was a reliable architect of safer ground. If he kept walking, he would build something safe out of tonight too. He would tell himself it had been a nice evening. He would mean it, and in a week, the specificity of it would soften into something general, and then into nothing, and that would be the end of it. He turned around. She was 20 steps away, walking with her head slightly down against the cold. "Eleanor," she stopped. She turned. Across the cold space between them, she looked at him. Marcus took a breath, the air sharp in his lungs, and walked back toward her. He did not tell her what he had almost not said. He stood in front of her on the empty sidewalk, and he asked, simply, if he could call her. She said yes. He said he would. She believed him, which was more than he had deserved, as of 10 minutes ago. They stood there a moment longer. Then she touched his sleeve lightly with 2 fingers, the way a person touches something to confirm it is real, and turned, and walked the rest of the way to the parking garage. Marcus watched her go until she disappeared inside, and then he walked back to his muddy truck and put both pieces of paper carefully on the passenger seat where the seatbelt would not crease them. The house was quiet when he came through the door. Loretta let herself out the moment she saw his face, which she did not ask about and which she did not need to. She just put on her coat and said, "I will see you tomorrow," and she was gone. The house held the shape of his daughter the way it always did after she went to sleep. A cup of water on the coffee table, a half-finished drawing of what looked like a giraffe wearing roller skates on the kitchen counter. 1 sock in the middle of the hallway. Marcus picked up the sock and set it by the door. He turned off the kitchen light. He sat down on the floor in the hallway outside Imani's room, with his back against the wall and his knees up, and he laid both pieces of paper on the floor in front of him. He looked at them for a long time. Imani's drawing on the right, the waxy, saturated crayon colors, the 2 figures with their shy smiles and their joined hands, the careful instruction, be kind to her, maybe she is lonely too. The other drawing on the left, older, softer. The pencil lines faded to the color of an old memory. 1 figure sitting, and 1 standing beside it with a hand on its shoulder. "It is okay. I am right here with you, sis." 2 drawings, 2 children, years apart and cities apart, and somehow they had ended up here, side by side on his hallway floor, saying the same thing. He thought about the 15 minutes Eleanor had sat in her car, about the 8 minutes he had sat in his driveway, about the 10 steps he had walked the wrong way before he had managed to turn around. He thought about the man at the next table, and the manager's calm hand on the edge of their table. He thought about the question that had been living quietly at the floor of his chest for longer than he had been willing to admit. Whether 8 years of building a life that was sufficient and stable and self-contained had left him any room for something that was uncertain and real in the way that things were real when they could also hurt him. He was 37. He had a daughter who picked up a stranger's phone number and made a 15-minute call because she believed kindness was a practical force in the world. He had spent 8 years being exactly enough. He had never asked himself whether he was allowed to want more than enough. There was a sound from inside her room, a small rustle, then the soft thump of feet on the floor. The door swung open and Imani appeared in the gap, squinting against the hallway light, her hair loose on one side, wearing the pajamas with the small stars on them. She looked at her father sitting on the floor the way children look at adults doing inexplicable things, curious but unsurprised. She came and sat down beside him, leaning into his arm. He wrapped it around her automatically. She looked at the 2 drawings between his knees. She picked up her own, examined it briefly, set it back down. Then she picked up the other one, the old pencil drawing she had never seen before, and held it carefully with both hands. Marcus watched her take in the 2 figures, the standing one with its hand on the shoulder of the sitting one. She set it back down with the same care she had picked it up. "Is she still lonely?" she asked. Her voice was soft with sleep. Marcus looked at the 2 drawings. "No," he said. "I do not think so anymore." Imani nodded once, satisfied. She leaned against his arm a moment longer. Then she said, quietly, "Did you remember to be kind?" He kissed the top of her head. "Yes," he said. "I remembered." She stayed beside him another minute. Then she got up, padded back into her room, and the door clicked softly into the 2-inch gap she liked. He called Eleanor the next day. They talked for 40 minutes. He called her 3 days after that, and they talked longer. The first Saturday in November, Marcus and Imani stood in the parking lot of Heron Lake Park and watched Eleanor's small white Honda pull into a spot 2 spaces away. Imani was wearing her yellow coat and her second-hand sneakers that she had refused to replace because she had drawn small flowers on the toes with a fabric marker. She was, for once, not talking. She was watching the car. Eleanor got out carrying a tote bag with a small drawing of a bird stitched onto the side. She did not crouch down to Imani's level, which Marcus appreciated. She also did not speak first. She just stood there with her tote bag and let Imani take the measure of her. "Hi," Imani said. "Hi," Eleanor said. They walked to the lake. Marcus and Eleanor talked, the easy conversation they had built over several weeks of phone calls, and Imani walked slightly ahead of them, kicking through the leaves. They found a bench near the water. Eleanor took a small spiral sketchbook from the tote bag and began, lightly, to draw. Imani lasted approximately 90 seconds before she migrated closer. On the page, a small figure was taking shape. A girl in a coat, with flowers on her shoes, standing near water. Eleanor finished the figure and held the sketchbook slightly in Imani's direction. "Is that you?" she asked. Imani stared at the drawing for a long time. Then she reached into her coat pocket and produced a small set of colored pencils held together with a rubber band. She picked out a teal one and added beside Eleanor's drawing a second figure, slightly taller, green jacket, tote bag with a small bird on the side. She drew it carefully. When she was finished, she held the sketchbook out to Eleanor. Eleanor took it. The 2 figures stood side by side on the page, one drawn in pencil, one added in teal. Different hands, different pressures, but together on the same piece of paper. Marcus was looking at the lake. He was looking at the lake because if he looked at either of them right then, something was going to happen in his face that he would prefer to manage privately. "She is not standing alone anymore," Eleanor said. "That is what I meant," Imani said. They walked back to the parking lot as the light went flat and the cold settled in. Imani reached up and took Eleanor's hand simply, without asking. Then she looked up. "Are you still lonely?" she asked. Eleanor looked down at her. She shook her head. Small, definite, real. Imani accepted this the way she accepted most true things. She squeezed Eleanor's hand once, let go, and ran ahead toward the car, because she had spotted a particularly large pile of leaves near the rear tire. "Come on," Imani called from the leaves. Marcus looked at Eleanor. Eleanor was already walking forward. Neither one of them, not even the man at the next table that night, who had been so certain he knew what he was looking at, had seen this coming.